Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to the CJS channel, where today we're back ranking Hollow Knight.
In this series, I listen, analyse and rank all the brand new Hollow Knight Silksong soundtracks for the first ever time. These 53 tracks will be separated across 7 videos so I can properly explain the composition. Each episode, my favourite one will be selected to advance to the finals in a bonus video at the end, where I will then declare the GOAT Silksong OST. And this is episode 5. Today is a very big day, not only in the series, but also for the channel. That is partially because this is video number 69, nice, but mainly because I've not had this many people so excited for a particular episode since this video, my most viewed ever, which also contained the infamous green screen disaster. Today will feature a combination of 8 different tracks from the Silksong OST, being The Choir, High Halls, Trobbio, Whispering Vaults, Cogwork Core, Cogwork Dancers, Songclave, and our first track for today, Choral Chambers. This is one of the tracks in particular you lot in the comments hyped up to be the second coming of Jesus. So will it be like watching the Mona Lisa be painted and potentially the sole Christopher Larkin masterpiece able to progress to the finals today, which of course will be the final episode featured at the end of the series? Well, I am incredibly excited to find out, as we say, let's go. Gorgeously elegant piano, reverberating between the E flat major 7 and G minor chords. Wow, a vocal choir enters alongside a light manic percussion. Could be a glockenspiel actually, but the open intervals of fourths and fifths elevates the heavenly harmonics. I do just want to quickly point out, this is different to the so-called perfect fourths and fifths I mentioned last episode in Blasted Steps, I'm pretty sure, as open is used without a third, which just makes the harmony feel a tiny bit more hollow. It's pretty complicated, and that's just the very simple definition of it, because I don't want to bore you. We are what, 45 seconds into the track, maybe 2 minutes into this whole video, and we've already peaked! This is, I believe, a trumpet sample. I know it sounds like a woodwind, an oboe in particular, but the timbre is almost too bright for it to be so. But anyway, the way it sings as a high counter melody, going up an octave, just summarises Hollow Knight Silksong in its entirety. Blossoming beauty, which you can just not help but smile and admire. And even here, with the high shimmers, chef's kiss. This is genuinely the most magical composition I have ever heard in gaming. The exposed vocals are buttery smooth through only tiny intervallic shifts. And now adding to the magic is some sparkly trills within the violin. I am lost for words. The soprano line shifts the harmonic weight in the most positive of all positive correlations through introducing what is called an add-to chord, which is a triad. And just when you thought it couldn't get any better, Christopher reintroduces the reverberation, but now with a larger cathedral-like gravity. Also, by the way, I forgot to mention that a soprano line is just the highest melodic part of a whole piece, and in choral music it is the highest of the SATB vocal choir group, which I explained in, I want to say, the Tundra Underground theme from the Venezuela Calamity ranking I did on my channel a few months back. There'll be a card right up here if you want to watch that. But like I said, that is only in choral music. And what was the name of this soundtrack? Choral Chambers. Subtle key change to cement our stay in E flat, as the suspensions were only teasing us of it before. And I also love the low drones in the background. And go back to reference the choir group from before. We've got some auto dissonance with the strings to help stabilise and resolve it at the end. That was something special. In conclusion, I think the only way Christopher managed to make the melody, the harmony, the symphony, rhythm, everything so beautifully picturesque is that he had a meeting with God himself beforehand. I'd say this is probably the most compositionally complex biome theme in this OST so far. Christopher showed such skill in his writing, for example through the low-end strings, embracing a 4/4 rhythmic bowing before implying a 6/8 over the top as the figures ascended. Other techniques such as the tremolos and rubatos, which is another Italian term I'm pretty sure for stolen time, and that basically expresses the performer's rhythmic freedom, but that, as well as the piano's reverberation, all lent a dreamlike quality to the entire piece. This is the music I expect to hear when I finally get a girlfriend, and truth be told, I want this played at my wedding too. The melodic progression was nothing short of sublime, which very nearly made me ascend again, as my ears felt like they're calling to a higher life form. And then they answer your prayers, as the bass is like them taking you under your wing and saying, "Don't worry, you're with us now. You're safe." And once you gain the element of trust that's necessary, you take a look around and realise it's not just the people that are otherworldly, but the landscape too. And with that final sequence, you observe a palace of gods. Wow, what a time to be alive. And what a privilege it is for us to be able to listen to something that bridges the gap of perfection down so very low. Choral Chambers puts the song in Silksong, and for the ranking, I don't even need to think where I want to put this. Sure! Honestly, hats off to Larkin for that one. Wait, hold up. Hats off to Larkin for that one. And honestly, I feel bad for the upcoming tracks, especially this one called Songclave, for having to follow that up. That literally put the song in Silksong. I knew that joke was destined to fail from the start. Let's go. We open with a tranquilizing G Aeolian arpeggio. And once again, we hear the Dies Irae motif that we've heard so often in this OST. Great development choice, introducing a double reed being the oboe to help tighten and advance the folk-like colour. Wow! Very harsh initial dissonance in the A against B flat, however it was then smoothed out after through effectively widening the spacing between them and penetrating through with a soft F piano progression. Well, that caught me off guard a little bit, but that was effectively done as it was a modal lean rather than a full key change, which then carried the decay along with it. But yeah, I did not expect a Celesta-like bell here. Let's keep going. Wow. Yeah, even though this track is quite short, Songclave has had one of the best developments in this entire OST. In conclusion, right from the very beginning, the very first key, this track engulfed me with a compassionate welfare, like getting a big hug from a life-size cuddly bear. Probably top 5 weirdest analogies I've ever done on the channel, but we're sticking with it. I was really impressed with how Christopher doubled down with that clustered dissonance. In some previous tracks, we've heard this used subtly, which is okay to create a sense of unease. However, in this track, up to this point, the piano, paired with the low strings and woodwinds, had felt a lot more distinctively intimate, so leaning in to the stack of seconds was a really good idea and made Songclave sound much more memorable. But although it didn't quite live up to the same heights as Choral Chambers, which was expected, this is still a track that I'd want to listen to on repeat. The way it was intentionally composed, with the 3/4 grouping and lower BPM of around 70, enabled Larkin to interplay between the melody and accompaniment, which then led to the excellent progression throughout. Christopher is cooking right now, but can we turn up the heat even more with our next track, Cogwork Dancers? Let's go. I probably should have figured this out based on the name, but we do have some mechanical textures, such as the percussive clicks, which admittedly I absolutely love. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Common time signature, although it does actually have a bit of a triplet overlay feel. And it reminds me a little of mechanical puppets. You know, the ones that are attached to strings and they dance around? I can't help but feel an element of eeriness at the moment. Maybe because I've always found those puppets a little weird and disturbing, but those playful high-pitched timbres and bouncy syncopations, I don't know, I just feel like there's a slight aspect of danger and jeopardy behind them. But no matter how I feel about puppets, they are designed to put on a show, which is exactly what this kinetic light bass and even these staccato chords from just before were doing, as the BPM accelerates to around 130, which is a naturally danceable tempo. I should quickly add as well, staccato chords are short and detached articulations, so in the bridge where it went dun, 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 that's what I was referring to. Oh my god! We transform from a jolly dance to a brutal brawl! There's got to be some Antonio Vivaldi inspiration here, who was an Italian master at Baroque pieces with texture shifts like this. Bells? Ah! I want to listen to this again as I've got a few things to say. Firstly, I feel like this is a whole new phase within this boss battle, as we can hear the ticking percussion clearer than ever, acting as a clock speeding up or time running out, consequently forcing the rest of the melody to speed up too. But one of the primary things that made me think of Vivaldi was using the strings as emotional drivers. I think the best example of this would come from his most famous composition, being the Four Seasons. But overall, Cogwork Dancers is already one of my favourites so far, and we're only a minute 17 in. It's just so spirited and full of life, which would sometimes describe as vivace. The orchestration explodes with more heroic accents, escalating the horn-like timbres to the point where it really gives the impression of a culminating centrepiece as everyone's focus is in on the climax. As the cogwork ticking reintroduces, but still in a higher tempo, despite the rituendo of the brass, so it still gives the best of both worlds of the fast-paced sensation and also monumental prospect. What?! This is unbelievable! The most absurd delayering happens, however it still resonates to a mechanical toy as it sounds a bit like a music box. And it resolves down to a 1 at the end, so I can imagine this is played just after defeating the boss as a kind of post-monologue. The show has now ended. In conclusion, did Christopher turn up the heat even more? Well, let's just say, he served us a dish that even prime Gordon Ramsay would be proud of. Once again, Larkin mastered the progression throughout. He's really taken a step up so far this episode, for a variety of different textures and techniques, but the one that stood out to me the most was how the clockwork accompanied the tempo increase. Well, up until the final phase, but we'll get onto that in a sec. It is pretty common to see percussive elements be used to signify a clock or time in OSTs, however Larkin's rendition of it here is much more unique as they've been integrated as musical cells, so effective building blocks to help shape the phrasing rather than just being an afterthought that sits on top of it. That is, however, up until the last 30 seconds, excluding the ending syncopation, where the harpsichord goes off on its own tangent away from the primary melody, which indicates desperation as either you or the boss you are fighting starts to lose control of this battle. Finally, I do just also want to give a shout out to another classic Baroque style technique Larkin used, which I was going to mention earlier, but I might have got distracted by some bells. But nevertheless, that's what's called contrary motion, which is when you've got two musical lines moving in opposite directions. So in this case, you had the upper notes moving down and the lower notes moving up at the same time. For the ranking now, and I do apologise if I've talked a bit too much here, although I do know that some of you enjoy the deeper analysis. This is the easiest decision I'm ever going to have to make, placing Cogwork Dancers in S tier. However, at the end of this video, I'm going to have to choose between this, Choral Chambers, and the other 5 OSTs still to come in this episode as to which one will go through to the finals. I can only choose one, which as you can imagine is going to be the hardest decision I'm ever going to have to make. Oh yeah, sure! Speaking of talking a lot, I've just realised I've been doing it so much, I've been recording for almost as long as it normally takes for a full episode. So to make sure this video isn't 2 hours long, starting with Cogwork Core, I'm going to try and do it a little bit less. I do wonder though how this relates musically and emotionally to its dancer's predecessor. Let's go. We start off with a celesta, which is also referred to as a bell piano, so I'm sure you can imagine what that instrument is like. And it's also based in G minor. Yes! Awesomely enchanting chord progression. The bass rises up to E flat major to rise the warm, full of life, and just general great vibes this soundtrack brings. Wait, I want to listen to that again real quick. Doo-doo-doo. Yes! The semi-quaver triplet just brings it all together and makes this such a catchy melody. We can still hear the... Oh, hang on. The whole composition tightens, whether that be the celesta, pads, or even these string trills here, which I think Larkin would have composed to focus the listener in more on the mechanical side of this piece, and even just there, the keyboard doubles to reinforce higher overtones and the music box immersion. That's actually quite similar to what I was going to say just before. As I expected, we can once again hear the percussive attacks used to represent a clock ticking or a cog turning, which of course fits perfectly into the mechanical sentiment these tracks give off. However, here in Core, it's performed slightly differently. The ticks are also tighter, even before that rhythmic shift, but comparing it to Dancers now, it's very strictly gridlocked, like a clock ticking every second as the hand goes round, and it's less musically incorporated. And that to me marks a sense of inevitability, as you're literally inside the mechanisms, and maybe the goal of this area is to do some platforming to escape. Whoa! Definitely heavy syncopation on the convolution reverb, which differs from an algorithmic or standard reverb. Ooh, triplets, by using real organic and acoustic samples called impulse responses rather than synths, which adds an extra layer of weight to the melody as they sound more realistic, again captivating you as if you are within or a part of the mechanism. In conclusion, although I mentioned about the G minor and E flat major earlier, across this whole track it was primarily based in C minor. This is another technique used by Christopher Larkin, albeit one of the more simpler ones, that embrace the mechanical sensation. Particularly in the second half of this track, this is conveyed through pedal tones, which I found really interesting as typically they're used to portray a grounded tension, so maybe contextually the bass is being really stubborn and it's refusing to move or elaborate or compromise, and it's kind of giving you a warning that the environment is in control. I also mentioned earlier how Cogwork Dancers potentially had some Vivaldi inspiration. However, here I could sense some ostinato motifs which carry the DNA of Howard Shore, who is of course the composer for The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and many more. And if a track is being compared to a professional with multiple Academy Awards, it just has to be the 3rd out of 4 S-tier tracks in this phenomenal episode. Sure! But of course, with that, we are now halfway through this episode, which means it's time for the fan favourite CGS segment. That's right, it's Comment of the Week. Firstly, I want to give a shout out to my Discord server, as I haven't properly done that in a while, and there is no better time to join than now, as both myself and my moderators have been working very, very hard over the last fortnight to finalise our biggest ever update of 1.7 that has only just been released. It introduces a whole new level system with many badges, colour rolls and other rewards that you can earn, and as if that wasn't convincing enough for you to join, you can also participate in our game night, where the bigger ones will be edited and uploaded onto the CGS community YouTube channel, such as the monthly Among Us videos, which I always participate in. So if you want to join and get closer with the amazing community I have, make sure you do so. Hello Diesel. through the link either in the description of this video or in my channel bio. Now with the self-promo out of the way, we can move on to the winner of Comment of the Week, which is actually quite a unique one, as I think it is the winner for the shortest amount of text ever, and also just the second time it's been won through a reply. So congratulations to Etherlight, who replied to Bliss467's comment of, "So she's confirmed to be single," which is a quote from me last episode when referring to Hornet. I know, it was a bit weird. You into spiders, my friend? Now, this is already quite a funny comment, and that's before Ether's response of, "Who isn't?" I'm sorry, what? Although this did make me laugh, and you have won, you've also now been exposed in front of thousands of people for being a formicophilia. And yes, I had to search it up. Time to delete my search history, so if that was worth it, then I guess congratulations. And as usual, if you would have a chance to be featured as Comment of the Week for episode 6 in this series, which will be out in 3 weeks, as this Saturday I will be live streaming, which you do not want to miss, make sure you subscribe and comment down below. Surely this obscenely high level that Christopher Larkin has held himself to this episode can't go on like this, can it?
It can.
It's time to find out through Whispering Vaults, the 5th track of the 5th episode. Let's go. Whoa, we start this track off on a very dark and somber note with some bell tolls, the same ones that we heard at the end of Suffering Leaves from Ultra Kill, which is typically used to announce a death or at minimum someone in a very difficult situation. Which is also backed up from this cello and G vocal overtone. Now Larkin introduces a new soltasto harmonic layer. If you think back to my cut through analysis in episode 3, I mainly talked about sol ponticello, and I even made a whole short around it, but there also briefly mentioned its opposite of soltasto, which is where you position the bow directly on the fingerboard. This creates a softer tone that manufactures the strings into being ghostly and eerie, which aligns with the vault's environment by leaving an echo of fragility, rather than a sol ponticello that would slide through the harmony, which would therefore lose the desired effect. Did you hear that? That toe lowered in pitch. Let me replay that quick. Yeah, it drops around a minor third to D4, give or take a couple notes. It's very difficult to read the exact register for something like this, but it doesn't matter anyway, as what truly matters is how that, as well as this higher voicing, makes you feel. For me, it adds a whole new level of ominousness. That's definitely not a word, is it? But you think, surely, it can't get any worse than this, can it?
It can.
Well, actually, on this occasion, it doesn't, as Larkin features a counter-response, where, after being dragged down to the very bottom, this spectral colour lifts the overall harmony, but only a tiny bit, as it still keeps the ritualistic danger. Almost like a tiny shimmer of hope beneath the gloomy, melancholic pain. Contrary motion progression. The bass and voicing slightly drop down before immediately leaping upwards to psychologically stretch out the layers, including the consistent bells. It went like doo-doo. Honestly, the bass has... Honestly, the bass has supported the choir so well across this entire soundtrack, facilitating a potential positive cadence. Let's just pretend that never happened. In conclusion, I think the most fascinating thing I could talk about, now just after listening to it again, is the time signature, as I read it to be 9/8, otherwise known as compound triple time, which, from memory, might be the first time we've ever heard it on the channel. It is admittedly a very confusing meter, so I'll try my best to explain it as simply as possible. So first, let's imagine a 4/4 time signature, the common time, most basic and generic one. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just like that, right? Now, double the speed of it for the 8th notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, you still with me? Instead of just going to 8, in the same tempo, let's just count up to 9 now. And do it with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that, in its simplest form, is 9, 8. We did it. It's usually counted in groupings of 3, so 1 and 2 and 3 and However, I figured the way that we did it would be a lot easier for everyone to understand. So if you did learn something new from this, make sure you give this video a like. Before I do the ranking, I again want to compliment how the melodic development was executed. Every 30 seconds or so, a new idea was introduced, often relating to a live instrumental solo, which sculpted a story abundantly filled with more Dies Irae motifs. Whispering Vaults was most definitely a foot tapper, so I'll place it right in the middle of B tier, in between Far Fields and Mount Bay. For the 36th original soundtrack in this quite simply Unreal series, we move on to Trobbio. I must admit, I did just have to search up the pronunciation to make sure it wasn't, I don't know, Trobbio. Actually, in hindsight, that sounds really stupid. I probably didn't need to search it up. But anyway, let's go. Oh, I already know I'm going to love this one as well. We start off with a white key glissando of A natural minor. Thank you, Christopher, for playing it again. Oh, the background snare as well. It adds so much enthusiasm. Yes! Amazing! Oh my god, that is what's called a piano concerto, which is a mix of a piano solo and orchestra. I've just got to replay that because just there. Wait for it, here it comes. Yes! Amazing! We've got the staccatissimo block chords, which are so Mozart and Beethoven. It's also similar to what's called Alberti style, which breaks the piano chords into a low-high, middle-high pattern. Although here, Larkin uses a slightly modified and compressed variant of that. Anyway, let's keep going, although I am pretty worried it's going to be another S-tier track. Jesus! Now we have a sequential descent on the harpsichord. It's just such ambition with every single key. It's amazing to hear really because we haven't heard a piano-based track in quite a while. What? This is romantic classical now. Legato strings, darker bass, more expressive yet softer minor chords. BC Trill, Frédéric Chopin, we're going all over the world with these composers. Christopher Larkin, I can't do this anymore. I don't even know what to do with myself. But hey, at least this is one of the first proper tracks that's actually looped. I don't even really know what to say, I just need a minute, or hour to catch my breath. It was just texture after texture constantly pounding me, no, that's an awful way to put it, bombarding me with theatrical explosions of aggressive percussions and bonkers transformations, such as that trill, which shared a mix of tension with the C as it was slightly dissonant to the A minor tonic below, and whimsicality with the release back to B. And this is all happening, by the way, in 30-second notes. Damn! The harmony thickens to an open fifth to bring a triumphant finale. Yeah! Once again, we had a trill, but this time it was oscillating between G and A. I think Larkin would have incorporated that to give a final holding of breath, as maybe both you and the boss you're fighting are on 1 HP before the resolution. In conclusion, Hollow Knight Silksong needs to be nerfed! I've subtly noticed the more recent tracks you've ranked so far in this episode have been a bit less orchestral. However, Trobbio just completely blows that sensation out of the water and just goes all in. From the higher octaves on the piano used to open up the track to the horn-like swells and harmonic modulations, this truly stood out as a track that I'll remember for a very long time. One of the things I love about this entire OST is how talented Christopher is with his classical compositions, and how each time he manages to sprinkle a little Larkin twist of controlled chaos. Here, he mastered the strings through soft articulations to effectively hold them and also the other textures back, which therefore empowered the piano even further. No prizes for guessing what I'm going to say next. Sure! Surely the S-tier streak can't go on like this, can it? Alright, I'm going to stop making that joke now. It can, or at least hopefully with high halls. Our penultimate track for today. Let's go. Ooh. We open with a sentiment of tranquility through the harp in G minor, almost acting as a lullaby. Ooh, an oboe jumps into the melody now, above the established register, knocking the harp out of place, which I'll allow on this occasion, as it creates a stunning modal shimmer. Christopher, I love you! We have a woodwind duet now with the flute. And the harp gets reintroduced! Oh my god, this is a dream come true for me. Hang on. I know I'm only meant to do this once per series, but my video, my rules. I'm ascending. This, ladies and gentlemen, is an enchanted elation. Larkin defines magic with now just a flute and harp. Well, I mean, it's changed now, but it was just a flute and a harp. Two of my favourite instruments on the planet in a moment of holy calmness. Also, I'm surprised because I'm pretty sure it just looped. Yeah, that's 2 tracks in a row now. Words could not describe how much warmth oozes from this rich mid-range harmony. Even those plucked pizzicato strings ascending in A major arpeggios, it keeps the delicate, almost buoyant transcript. Actually, for this, I can kind of show you the triadic progression. Get ready for this because it's going to be something new for the channel. I don't have a harp, however I do have an old guitar, which I must admit isn't tuned very well, so here we go. A, C sharp, E, A. Yes, I know it sounds nothing like the harp in the soundtrack, but that's partially down to it being a different string, partially down to it not being tuned very well, and partially down to my skill level, or lack of. But at least you can hear the ascent and see which notes were played. So let's do it again real quick. A, C sharp, E, A. Just like that. In conclusion, that was a slight disaster. Let me know if you want to see me show off more of the notes in the future, because watching that back just now was pretty funny. But what wasn't funny, or a disaster, of course, the beautiful melody of High Halls. Despite being almost 2 minutes long, there were only a total of 3 instruments used, which is insanely low even for an architectural track like this. Of course, there were some background ambient pads and pedals, but I think Larkin decided on this to focus and maximise on their potential, explore overlapping ideas, which once again worked amazingly, and I cannot fault it in the slightest. I might be wrong, but I feel like there was a shellwood motif in here, so I'll place High Halls right above that, as after all, it did make me ascend in the top half of A tier. And finally, we move on to the choir, the last track in this long but unforgettable episodes. So many bangers, and probably the best overall quality for a singular music ranking video I have ever done. Can we lock that in here with this too? Let's go. Aggressive string tremolo. And I did think there was going to be a choir in this track. No idea how I came up with that idea though. The green screen drops one final time as the brass drops in with an overwhelming presence, and that's not to mention the vocals surging forward with impending doom. All in, I think, a 5/4 signature. Damn! I physically felt that stab, it was so piercing. Alongside those ascending ritual choral chants, which to me betrays the intensity rising up as maybe waves of enemies surround and overwhelm you. I should probably grab my green screen now, I kind of need it. There was a subtle yet incredibly effective use of metric displacement there, which I'll explain in a sec, as the triumphant trumpet cleverly utilised the interlude as a distraction for the key change, escalating the stakes of this battle to open the gates of heaven. Maybe the winner gets to go through those gates, but the loser plummets into hell. What an epic finale! Epic finale pictured through the intervallic and diatonic sequence. In conclusion, I've got a couple things that I need to explain, starting with when I brought up the metric displacement. There, Larkin deliberately delayed the low string resolution from beat 1 to the end of the 5/4 signature, so beat 5, which not only throws you off and catches you a little bit off guard, which of course could represent in-game too, but it also keeps you hanging. And it does that to the point where your ear is literally craving for the swell to finally come through. And when it eventually does a couple seconds later, it releases some inner built-up tension and encourages you ready for the following phase or section of this war. And speaking of following phase or section, that is when we were met with the intervallic and diatonic sequence. They are two different things, but they are both incorporated within this final ascension. Intervallic is when a series of notes move up or down through a consistent motion, whereas diatonic focuses more on the melodic phrase and how that consistently moves up and down, but in pitch while staying in the same key. And that was all embodied into the violin, where I'm pretty sure it ascended every other note, or paired note ascent, that's the actual name for it. So D, D, C, C, B, B, etc. Moving away from those techniques, however, the choir really specialised in its choir, obviously, by doubling in its octaves and also actually avoiding the standard SATB, which as a reminder consists of soprano, alto, tenor and bass. I believe the primary reason Christopher decided to do this was to once again catch you a little off guard and avoid predictability, culminating in a supernatural panorama, which I'm sure in-game would only be multiplied tenfold as you are fighting for your life. Now, for the ranking. Honestly, I'm really on the fence of either top of A tier or bottom of S, but that combination of the classic Larkin strings in conjunction with the voicing that was so beautifully sung despite being non-linguistic, F tier. No, I'm obviously joking. It just about does enough for one final, sure! And with that, I can definitively say, excluding the Ultra Finals, which doesn't really count as that was a special video, this is the greatest ever video in terms of level shown within these tracks. We had 1 in B tier, 2 in A, and a whopping 5 in S. Unbelievable. However, I can also definitively say this is the hardest ever decision to single out just one track to progress through to the finals of this series. I've had some thought, and because it feels unfair for certain tracks to miss out, I've figured out a way that your favourite track can have one final opportunity to make it through to the finals, which I'll announce at the beginning of episode 7, the last normal episode before that aforementioned finals. But enough stalling. The Choir, Trobbio and Cogwork Core were all incredible tracks, but for me the big decision is down between Cogwork Dancers and Choral Chambers. The 5th track to progress through to the finals is Cogwork Dancers! Wow, what an episode. Let me know in the comments what your favourite track was from the 8 today, and I'll try my best to either respond or heart every single one. As a reminder, I'll be doing just my 2nd ever live stream on Saturday, so make sure you come along and say hi, and also make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the final 3 Hollow Knight Silksong videos, especially after today as this series is ramping up. But for now, good night. I really hurt my knee doing that. I smashed my knee on the metal bit just underneath my desk. Choral Chambers, I need this. My knee is kind of shattered.